Hello dear students, myself Dr. Sachin Arjun Gurule, Assistant Professor from KTHM College, Nasik. In the previous video of Entomology first, we have completed the topic that is head skeleton in insects, and we have also completed the endoskeleton of the insect head and the modifications of head capsule. Now in this video, we are going to learn the structure, articulation and musculature of antennae among the insects. So let's see the antennae of generalized insect. Now insect head is characterized by possessing a single pair of antennae. They are actually the paired appendage of the second pre-oral segment, so called as the antennal segment according to the classical theory of head segmentation that we have learned already. The antennae of an insect are homologous with the antennae of the crustaceans. So similar kind of the structure is also recognized among the crustacean organism, but in crustaceans we can refer the organ as an antennae, but among the insects we call such a kind of the organ which is present on the head is known as antennae. But there is a difference between the number of such a kind of appendages present on the head of insect and the crustacean. Being head of the insect only consists of a single pair of antennae, while among the crustaceans there are two pairs of such structures are there, and they are referred as the antennae. Now antennae are the uniramous, segmented and mobile paired structures. So obviously uniramous in the sense it has only single terminal region, means it do not have any kind of the branching. If such a kind of the appendage is there in arthropod, we call such organs appendages referred as the uniramous. When the terminal portion of appendages is bifurcated, then we can refer this condition as a biramous. But here in case of antennae is a uniramous, obviously it is a segmented, which is the basic character again, and most importantly is a mobile and paired structure. So they are basally fixed into the deep antennal sockets. Each antennal socket is provided with the external antennal sclerite, with the antennal suture and with the internal broad membrane, and that broad membrane is referred as the antapodium. So each antennal socket occupies the position behind the respective ocellus in the arthropteroid insect, but it may shift from anterior region of the parietum to the facile region, approaching the frontal suture, or even in some cases it is occurs at the mandibular basis also. Means we can say the position of the antennal socket greatly varies from the different group of the insect or from insect to insect. The antennae are known to be absent among the Protura and in larvae of most of the hymenopteran insects. So these two groups, first of all Protura, in the adult condition they do not have the antennae, or in a premature stages also antennae is also absent. But among the hymenoptera, adult contains the antennae, but their larval stage do not contains the antennae in most of the condition. So antennae are lacking in a Protura and larval condition of the hymenoptera. Now these structures are typically innervated by the antennal nerves, and these antennal nerves arising from the deuterocerebral lobe of the brain, because the deuterocerebral ganglion is a composite ganglion belongs to the antennal segment, and obviously antennal segment according to the classical theory bears an antenna, and by the rule whatever ganglion which is present in that segment is going to provide a nerve innervation to the organs belongs to that segment only, and hence the antenna as they are lies into the antennal segment of the head, and it consists of the deuterocerebral lobe of the brain. Hence, this due to cerebrum is providing antennal nerves to the antennae. So, this is about the introduction for the antennae. So, let's see first of all the structure of antennae. Now, antennae of an insect typically composed of the basal segment known as the scape, then middle segment known as the pedicel, and the single segment which are the single segmented division. But the terminal portion of the antennae, which is always having a multiple segment generally, and this is referred as the flagella. So in this way, structurally, there are three divisions of the antennae: basal segment known as a scape, middle segment known as a pedicel, and terminal multi-segmented part is referred as the flagella. Now, as we have already discussed, the scape and pedicels are single segmented, means it is made up of only single segment, and these two segments are actually responsible for articulation of the antennae. And most importantly, the scape has the major role of the articulation. The flagellum is always multi-segmented, and it is the longest part of the antenna in most of the insect. The number of segments of the flagellum are increased in a successive instap, suggesting the secondary or tertiary subdivision segmented throughout the life. So all the segments of the flagellum are alike in most of the insect. But in some insects, for example in this slide, you can see this is the example of the chalcid fly. The flagellum is again further differentiated into the three regions. So here in this figure, this is a magnified view to show the structure of antennae. So this is the antennae. This basal segment is obviously known as a scape, middle segment known as a pedicel, and this terminal is known as a flagellum. Here in this case, the flagellum is further composed of the three part or the three region. The proximal region is composed of the ring segment. So this is the proximal region of the flagellum. This proximal region is referred as the ring segment. Here, follow the label. So this is a ring segment. Then middle region is composed of peg-like segment forming a funicle. So this one is a funicle which is having a peg-like structure, and the distalmost portion is composed of a swollen segment forming a terminal or the distal club. So in this way, in most of the insects, flagellum is generally having a uniform smaller segments. But in some cases, for example, chalcid fly, this flagellum further divisible into the three regions as a ring segment. Then the peg-like part is known as the funicle, and distalmost or the terminal portion can be referred as a terminal or so-called as a distal club. The scape bears the two apodems, of which one apodem is a dorsal and other at the ventral portion. Now both apodems are approaching closely the antacoraeum membrane. They are spindle shaped and provide the site of attachment for the muscles innervating the scape of the antennae. I have already told you that the basal segment, so called as a scape and pedicel, these are actually responsible for articulation of the antennae with that of the antennal socket or in the antennal socket of the head capsule. Particularly the scape region, it is provided with the two apodems. Apodems, these are the site where actually the muscles are arise. They are referred as the apodems. So there are two apodems. One is dorsal and another is at the ventral. The pedicel bears a slender apodem proximally only. It is inserted by the flexor muscles of the flagellum. So here these are the flexor muscles, and these flexor muscles, they are coming from the apodems of the segment known as the pedicel. But if you see the flagellum, flagellum is devoid of endoskeletal processes and the muscles. Usually means they do not have any kind of the processes, and separate musculature of the flagellum is also absent. So this is about the generalized structure of the antennae. The next topic, that is the articulation of antennae. As I have told you that the scape is responsible for articulation of entire antennae in a various direction. Now actually there are two types of articulation can be seen among the insects. The one in which the type is found into the grylotalpids. In case of the grylotalpid, lateroventral process is held in a groove on the rim of antennal socket along a few cuticular processes. And these few cuticular processes, they are responsible for holding that antenna. And the antacoreum may also take part in the process of articulation, in which rest of the base of scape is also embedded into the antennal socket, which is lodged into the antennal sockets, which is present into the head of insect, and in this way the antennae is get articulated into the antennal socket. So this kind of the articulation of the antennae is found into the grylotalpid. And second one, which is the most generalized and found in remaining all the insect, where the scape is articulated by a pivot-like process of the antennal ridge is known as the antennifer. So here in this diagram you can see, so this is an antennifer and this one is a pivot-like process actually. And this pivot-like process is responsible for articulation. Now this antennifer fits into the basal groove of the scape. So this is the scape, and at the basal region, whatever groove is there, this antennifer, which is a pivot-like structure, which is get lodged or fits into the basal groove of the scape, and the scape is inserted freely into the membrane known as antacoreum, so that antenna articulates in all directions. So this kind of the articulation can be very generalized and is found into the insect except the grylotalpids. Means there are two kinds of the articulation can be found, either of the grylotalpid, where ventrolateral processes they are held into the groove on the rim of antennal socket along with some cuticular process, and the antacoreum is also having the role of the articulation of the antennae into the antennal socket. While in case of other insect, there is a pivot-like process which is referred as an antennifer, and this antennifer is fit into the basal groove of that scape, and in this way the antennae can able to move in all direction through that pivot-like process known as antennifer. And this kind of the articulation is the second type of articulation. But this articulation, it requires a different kinds of the musculature. So it is necessary to study the musculature of the antennae, which is exactly responsible for the movement of antennae, as well as they are also assisting in articulation of the antennae into the antennal socket. So let's see the musculature of antennae. Now in the insect from Thysanura to all Pterygota, each antennae is innervated by 4 types of muscles. And these 4 types of muscles are broadly categorized as the extrinsic muscle and intrinsic muscles. Obviously their name, they are suggesting their origin. Extrinsic in the sense they are arise from external side, and intrinsic from means they are arise from internal side. So again there are 2 extrinsic muscles and 2 intrinsic muscles. So let's see one by one. First of all, the extrinsic muscles. Now this extrinsic muscle includes the levator muscles and the depressor muscles. So if you see these 2 diagrams here, this one is a pair of levator muscle and this is a pair of depressor muscles. Means extrinsic muscles consist of, or it includes the 2 categories of muscles, levator muscle and the depressor muscles. Now each of them is composed of further two branches. One is inner and another is outer. Suppose this is a levator muscle. So this one is an inner branch and this one is an outer branch. Similarly, if these are the depressor muscles, so this is an inner branch and this is an outer branch. Here the same is there. Okay, so this is a depressor muscle and levator muscle. The outer branch, inner branch. So this one is again outer branch and this one is a inner branch. This extrinsic muscle arises from the anterior tentoral arms, or as seen in some cases from both anterior and dorsal arm. In the previous lecture we have already learned the endoskeleton of the insect, that is tentorium. This is nothing but, or this tentorium is nothing but the ingrowth of some apodemal arms. For example, we have seen the anterior tentorial arm, which arises from the anterior tentoral pit. Now these levator muscles and the depressor muscles, these muscles are attached to the anterior tentorial arm. But in some cases we have already seen at the middle region of anterior tentorial arm, there are pair of processes, and that pair of processes are referred as a dorsal arm, and we have already discussed that dorsal arm, they may reaches up to the base of antennae. This is just for providing a space of attachment to these two muscles, levator muscle and depressor muscles. Means dorsal arms, whenever present, it reaches up to the basal part. Suppose this is a basal part of the antennae, it may reaches up to the basal part, and these depressor muscle and levator muscles are either attached to the anterior tentorial arm or directly to the dorsal arms of the anterior tentorial arm. The levator muscles are inserted into the dorsal apodems of the scap, which is a basal segment. The depressor muscles are inserted into the ventral apodems of the scap. So this is a ventral apodem and this one is a anterior apodem or dorsal apodem. So levator muscles are attached to the dorsal apodem, while the depressor muscles are attached to the ventral apodem of the scap. So this is about the extrinsic muscle. The next category of the muscles is referred as the intrinsic muscles. Now again, these intrinsic muscles are of two types in antennae, and it includes the flexor muscles and the extensor muscles. So in this diagram you can see, so this one is a flexor muscles and these are the extensor muscles. So these flexor muscles and extensor muscles are comes under the category of the intrinsic muscles of antennae. Now it is apparent that these muscles moves the flagellum and hence they are called as flexor and extensor of the flagellum. Means flexor is responsible for flexion and for the extension, extensor muscles work, and hence accordingly they are referred as the flexors of flagellum or extensor of the flagellum. Both this flexor and extensor muscle arises from the base of scap. So this is a scap and this is a basal part. From there they are generally arises, while the flexor muscles is inserted on the outer side, while the extensor muscle on the inner side of the base of pedicel. So this is the pedicel and this is the basal region. From the basal region these muscles are arises. Meaning at one hand these extensors and flexor muscles are making a communication with the basal part of the scap, but they are arises from the apodems which are developed on the basal part of the pedicel. So this is about the intrinsic muscles. Now no segment of the flagellum bears any type of muscle. Means muscle belongs to that flagellar segment is completely lacking or absent, and it is a peculiar feature of the pterygota and thyssanura. Means among the all pterygota and thyssanura, the muscles belongs to the flagellum, they are completely absent. In rest of the pterygota, beside the scap and pedicel, all segments of the flagellum provided with the intrinsic muscles. Means among the pterygota, the muscles are there into the flagellum. But in case of the pterygota, and one order belongs to the pterygota, that is Thysanura, they do not show the presence of muscles among the flagellum. Now each segment bears a 5 muscles which arise from the base of one segment and terminate it into the other. This is the condition generally found into the remaining pterygote insect. Now which pterygote insect? Obviously the Protura. Then Columbella is there. So these are the pterygotan insect where the flagellar segment also contains a muscles. From this we can say that in a higher insect, the muscles belongs to the flagellum, they are absent, while in a lower insects or such so-called as a pterygote insect except Thysanura, the muscles of the flagellum, they are present and they arise from one base of the one segment and it terminates into the other. So in this way, the antennae, they are provided with a different kinds of the muscles, and with the help of that muscle, they can able to move the antennae in a various direction. Obviously, the antennae are tactile in function, and in addition to having a tactile function, it also having some sensilla on the antennae among the some insect. So they are actually the sensory structure. So this is about the topic, that is antennae, structure of antennae, articulation of antennae, and the musculature of antennae. Thank you very much.